Hey everyone. All right, last chapter for Nickel and Dime selling in Minnesota. Here she travels over to Minnesota to get some retail jobs, including Walmart and another place. So, for the discussion, number one, while observing the living conditions and how much people make living in difficult neighborhoods, the author writes on page 131, people are earning nearly $40,000 a year, which makes them officially middle class. Define what is middle class to you. What should you be able to afford if someone is middle class? Think in terms of housing, cars, vacations, etc. Now, there isn't like a specific straight number that is middle class. What there is, though, is middle class is defined as the medium, half below and half above the median wage. So, I did a bit of research here. Let me take a look at my notes. So the median wage in California as of last year was $96,265. So half below, half above would mean middle class is anywhere from $48,000 to about $145,000 a year. And that's middle class for the Bay Area. Again, you can think of that in terms of what should you be able to afford. You could think, well, it's actually really expensive to live here. It's really expensive to get gas, buy groceries, things like that. But you may think $145,000 is a lot of money and you would be rich, but you're still middle class and still may not be able to afford as much as you may think or may need even. Okay, number two. During the application process, especially at Walmart, Ehrenreich notes that she's never quite sure when she's officially hired, nor when she's able to discuss her employment. It appears her hiring is assumed. What effect does this have on the employee, and what does this say about the employer's position in the hiring process? Well, it's kind of a whirlwind process. If the employee never knows when they're officially hired, they don't typically then ask questions. They can't negotiate price. They can't negotiate hours. They can't even ask questions if you're not quite sure when the right time or the right place or the right person is. And what this does is this puts the employer in the kind of position of control, right? If you're off balance, if you're confused, if you don't quite know when and how to do things, then it's the employer that can go, okay, this is next, then this, then this, then that, and they get to determine, how and when and how quickly to do things. And thereby kind of discouraging, just by the process, any speaking out or any questions, things like that. So it certainly puts the employer at the advantage and in control. Number three, on page 153, the author reflects on her housing search. Poor women really do have more to fear. In what way, where does this more to fear come from in how our society and gender roles are defined? Well, if you think about the stereotypes, certainly traditional stereotypes of how women are supposed to be, how they're supposed to act, things like that, then women are the fairer sex. They are certainly to some the weaker sex physically. They are taught to be non-aggressive and not strong and not in a position, or at least that they should not speak out. And so all of these things kind of contribute to the idea that women at least would be better targets. If they are physically weaker, then certainly it's much easier to overtake them, again, physically. If they're non-aggressive, they won't fight back, at least not as readily. And if they are not taught to question or speak out, then you'll probably get away with it. At least that's the thinking. And so if you have a poor woman looking for housing, a bad neighborhood is going to really, really not be safe, not be a good option, things like that. I remember having this conversation. A friend of mine, she wanted recommendations for like a Mexican food place somewhere. And I said, oh, well, here's a good one. And I recommended it and said the food and everything was good. And she asked where it was. And I said what street it was on and in the neighborhood. And she said, well, I'm not going there. That's not safe to be there at night. Now, I felt perfectly safe, but I'm male, I'm 6'1", and I'm, 200 pounds. I'm a lot less of a target than a female, certainly alone, who is, 5'7" or 8" and, 60 pounds lighter than I am. So, that was a point where I didn't take that into consideration. She obviously did, and that's why she kind of rejected that recommendation. But yeah, it's not only the way that people see you, but if people know the way people are seen, then, it takes away certain resources like housing and maybe bus stops at night or restaurants, things like that, dark parking lots. So all of that is kind of factored into this. Let's see, how did she put it? Poor women really do have more to fear. Okay, number 4. Ehrenreich concluded that had her working life been spent in a Walmart-like environment, she would have emerged as a different person. Meaner, pettier Barb instead of Barbara. How would your personality change if you were placed in working conditions, hopefully, very different from the ones you are in now? I know it's, and I think I've mentioned this before, but I know it's, kind of a popular thing to go, oh, if it happens at work, save it for work or leave it at work and don't bring it home. But that's not always the case. Something angers you or pisses you off at work, you're probably going to drive home angry. You can't just shut off your emotions, certainly the strong ones, just like a light switch. You kind of have to decompress and work through it. So after years and years and years of this in a Walmart-like position where you may get frustrated, where you may become demeaned or feel invisible, things like that, your personality may tend to shift. You tend to maybe look at customers or management differently. And in fact, in this case, it only took about a month, probably a little less, for the author to see someone who was handicapped and wheelchair bound and to basically envy them because they were able to sit down. Now, granted, they couldn't get up, but there is that shift in perspective. I doubt very highly that the author would envy a wheelchair-bound customer before this experience. All right, number 5. The workers in Nickel and Dimes received almost no benefits, no overtime, no retirement, and no health insurance. Do you think an increase in salary would address the lack of benefits, or is it a completely different issue? Now, I think it's actually a completely different issue. We've seen, various stories of people and how they live and what they can afford and what they can't afford and things like that. You can cynically go, oh, well, if, you give people more money, then they'll just go buy alcohol or whatever. Pardon me. Which, I don't know, may be true. But even if you think best case scenario, they probably wouldn't go to buy health insurance or put money into a 401k. They just may need, better work clothes, maintenance on a car. If they have kids, they might buy their kids clothes, food, school supplies, things like that. I think there are other immediate needs with those in poverty rather than either investments or healthcare, things like that. And I think while I think this increased wage would be good, I don't think it's everything. I don't think it's going to, completely solve the problem of those living in poverty. They say that there's, what is it? I don't remember the percentage. It's 50, 60% maybe of families who don't even have $400 in savings in case of an emergency. Certainly increasing the wage would help that, but not some of the other lack of resources. All right, number 6. Nickel and dime takes place in between 1998 and 2000, a time of unprecedented prosperity in America. Do you think the author's experience would be different in today's economy, and how? Well, even before COVID-19, of course, COVID-19 has increased unemployment a great deal, increased dependency on food banks and other social programs, as we've seen in other chapters. But at least in the Bay Area, things are a lot more expensive than other parts of the country. I think that's why she stayed away from California. But now, of course, there's the unemployment, and so she may not have even gotten a job, which, of course, would have thrown her whole idea of matching income to expenses completely off. There wouldn't have been an experiment at all. And just kind of things are, if restaurants and grocery stores and everything else either have limited hours or just aren't open at all, then it becomes even more difficult. Although if you're unemployed, you don't have any money to do that stuff anyway. So that's about it. Hopefully you enjoyed the book, enjoyed her writing style a little bit. So that's it. I will see you in Rereading America.